Death by autopilot. Death by autopilot. Death by autopilot. And death by autopilot. Hello everybody. Today we're going to be going over some more aviation stuff. Today I'm going to be talking about autopilot deaths. And you can see here, I'm going to put something on the screen here of the last number of accidents that are related to autopilots. You can see here that we have a December 7th, 2023 at Debonair. We have a TBM 960 on March 30th, 2024. And a Twin Commander on April 13th, 2024. And a Piper Malibu, April 16th, 2024. So that's a lot of accidents just regarding autopilots. So I'm doing this video today to teach you how and when to use your autopilots and not get yourself killed. Alright? Just give me a second here, guys. I gotta wet my whistle. Ah, that's better. Alright, so now that I showed you the number of accidents that happened over the last 5 months, we're going to be taking a look on the screen here where I'm going to show you when to use your autopilot. And these are just some simple rules. It's not complicated, it's not hard. So you can go out and do this as soon as we're done watching this video here, okay? And the first one is when to use your autopilot. And there's only 2 things you need to remember. You use your autopilot in cruise to do cockpit duties only. So that would be to check your maps, to give yourself an approach briefing, to do checklists, to tune and ident radios, stuff like that. If you're flying a turbine, you can do your trend monitoring at that time when you get to cruise. That's when you use your autopilot. The second time you can use your autopilot is when you're descending down from high altitude. Alright? That's when you're going to use your autopilot. Now, the reason for that is, I got my little plane here. If you're flying along in these 2 scenarios, the airplane's going to be straight pretty much. It's not going to be climbing or turning. If anything goes wonky with the autopilot, you can correct it with lots of altitude underneath you. So it's giving you a safety buffer. Okay? So that's why these are the only 2 reasons that you're going to use the autopilot. And I'll tell you, you do what I tell you, you're not going to get killed. Alright? And you're not flying an Airbus or a Boeing, you're flying general aviation aircraft. And I think that's where people get a little bit mixed up, because the Boeing products and the Airbus products, they were a computer, then they designed the airplane around the computer, and that's a completely different animal. So we're general aviation, you are man and machine with add-on features to make things easier. Alright? So now we're going to go to the next slide, which is never use your autopilot. And here we go. Number 1, never use your autopilot at low altitude. You don't want to be flying around 400 feet and have your autopilot go crazy, because if it does something like a pitch down or something aggressive, you're going to be flown straight into the ground. I think that's pretty common sense. The second time you don't want to use your autopilot ever is when you're doing IFR approaches. You're going to go in and start doing your IFR approach and you're doing your procedure turn and you lose an engine in a twin. Well, what's the first thing on your checklist when you lose an engine? Disconnect the autopilot. Okay? So you don't want to be doing IFR approaches with your autopilot. Have faith in yourself. Use stick and rudder to keep your scan up. And that's just the way it's got to be when you're flying general aviation in the soup. When you're going down to do your IFR approaches, never have that autopilot on. You don't want it to go wonky on you. And we can see the accidents that's happened here already, so we got a body count to back this up. Number 3, never use your autopilot climbing to altitude. Alright? And what's going to happen if you're going to be low, you're going to be climbing out of an airport, what's going to be happening? You're going to be climbing at best rate or best angle or whatever it may be with the nose up. Alright? And if the autopilot goes freaky on you, it could pitch the nose up and then do a stall spin kind of thing, and you could crash in your low altitude again because you're just climbing out. So never use your autopilot for climbing out. Number 4, never use your autopilot in icing flight conditions. And we can see what happened with that twin commander that went down in California there. The guy's on the radio saying that his autopilot's bumping off and he's in moderate icing. And he's sounding all calm throughout the thing, and all of a sudden they lose communication with an altitude alert. And we know what happened. He crashed and died. All right, so never use your autopilot while you're in icing. And I think other people have mentioned too, what happens is when you're starting to pick up ice with the autopilot, you're not feeling the airplane. And the trim wheel is going to start trimming itself off until it hits the stop. And then the autopilot's going to try to hold that, and all of a sudden it's going to let go. And if you're heavy with ice, you're going to stall a lot sooner, and the plane's just going to basically crash like a stone. And that's what happened to that twin commander. So when you're in icing conditions, you always want to feel the airplane. And if you ever do get in the ice, don't hang around in there. You got de-icing equipment, you got boots, and all they're good for is to get you out of it. So as soon as you get into any icing conditions, you got three options. You go up, you go down, or you turn around and go back the other way. That's it. You don't keep treading on for another 30, 40 miles through there and building up ice. Especially if you're flying something like a Caravan, that aircraft will ice up in like 5 minutes, okay? Depending on the icing conditions. Number 5, never, ever, ever use your autopilot in a missed approach. And we can see what happened in Truckee, California with that TBM 960. Beautiful aircraft. But it does everything, that airplane. It even has auto throttles and FADEX. You can dial everything in. It does everything perfectly. But as soon as that autopilot screws up, you're dead. All right? Because guys are becoming what I call autopilot dependent. We're just going to dial everything in and push a button. Oh, we don't see the runway, missed approach. You're too low. You're too low, and if that autopilot does anything crazy, you're dead. And I think that's what happened to them. They kind of went into a nose up attitude with the turn and stall, spin in, and crashed. So never ever use your autopilot in missed approaches. Ever. You're low to the ground, you hand fly that damn thing. Remember, you're general aviation. You're not an airliner. Airlines are a different animal. Now, number 6, and the last one, is turbulence. And that would be the Piper Malibu that crashed. And what was the date on that anyways? The Malibu crashed on April 16th of 2024. And what happened was he was flying through turbulence. He was probably beyond his maneuvering speed. But my hunch is he didn't crash because he was excessive his maneuvering speed. Now, that's not good for the airplane. My hunch is, excuse me for a second, guys. I got something in my throat. Sorry. It's because if you ever take a look at an autopilot, they can be very jerky, like very abrupt, very machine-like. And if you're flying along and you have the altitude hold on, that aircraft is really going to try to hold its altitude. And if this turbulence is pushing them up and down like this, that little flipper in the tail is kind of doing this. And it's just jerking back and forth, back and forth. And my hunch is because of the jerking motion of the altitude hold on, busted off the fin of the tail, and down he went and crashed and died. Now, some autopilots have what they called attitude hold. So you got altitude hold and you got attitude hold. Now, here's a little thing for you guys. When you fly through a thunderstorm, what do? You maintain your attitude. You don't try to hold your altitude, and you penetrate right through. So some of these more advanced aircraft, you go from altitude mode to attitude mode, and it just basically rides through it. Never try to hold your altitude. Just ride through it and keep the wings level. All right? So that's my hunch. He didn't have attitude mode on, or he didn't have it, and he was trying to hold his altitude and snap the tail off in the back, the fin. It was flapping up and down. It was just trying to maintain altitude. And I bet you his yoke was kind of doing all this too. So you get into turbulence, go hands-on or attitude mode if your autopilot has it. All right? So just be aware of that. So those are the 6 things that you never use your autopilots ever. If you do what I tell you, you're not going to get killed. All right? All these accidents here are because of my nevers, 1 to 6. Now, Tennessee Fly Girl, she's a different case. I still don't know what's happened to her. Possibly a stall spin thing, but there's not enough information for me to really determine what's happened to her. But the commander for sure, because he was on the radio saying he's picking up moderate ice and his autopilot's kicking off. That means he's trimmed all the way out. So that's pretty spooky when you're hearing that. So just keep that in mind. Now, the other thing I want to do with you before we say goodnight tonight is how do we avoid all these things? And the answer to this is basically doing proper flight planning and weather briefing. Now, I'm going to put this sheet up here, and it's just a simple sketch, so don't get all worried about it. But you're going to see here, when I put this up, I'm starting it at sea level with some easy numbers here. And at the top right, you'll see aircraft A, all right? And I got IFR beside it. And you can see aircraft A is constantly in cloud and ice. And that's what's going on with the TBM and also the Air Commander. They're getting into icing and they're staying in it, and it's building up on them. And they're flying many miles, and it's just getting worse and worse on the airframe. That's how those crashes happened. Aircraft A is not the way to do it. Now, if you take a look at aircraft B, you can see you start at sea level, and then aircraft B will climb up to 2,000 feet, and then it's going to smash through that cloud layer and pick up a little bit of ice. But once you get through to 3,000 feet, I got open air. All right? So you're going to have open air between 3,000 and 5,000 feet. And once you're in that open air, you're not going to pick up any ice. If you did pick up ice, throw on your anti-ice, flick your boots, blow off the ice, and stay in that column of clear air all the way to your destination. Now, what you got to remember is it's got to be like that from A to B. You can't have any crap in the middle. All right? So that's why do proper flight planning and make sure you got a couple thousand feet between the two layers. All right? If the layers start squeezing together, you got room for error. You don't want two layers to be too close because you can get ragged ceiling. All right? And that can cause you problems. Now, the other thing about being a Canadian bush pilot here in the Great White North, and we get minus temperatures for 6 months a year, or 9, whatever it may be, we got a thing up here called special VFR, if you take a look at aircraft C and D. All right? And you can see one aircraft's going this way and one aircraft's going the other way because you're not bound by the altitude cruising order, not like you are with IFR. So if you're flying aircraft B to your destination, you drop off some cargo and you got to fly back to base, but now the cruising altitude order says you have to fly a little higher, you're going to be in the category, you're going to be aircraft A, flying through all that shit again to get back home. You can't do that. You're going to have to go down to aircraft D and go back home special VFR. And the great thing about flying special VFR is you don't have to talk to anybody unless you're skirting a control zone. You're not talking to center. You're too damn low. You're going to be 1,000 feet or less, right? Now, the only problem about special VFR is you can't use it in mountainous areas because it's too damn dangerous to do that. But if you're over flat terrain, let's say like in Oklahoma or in Texas or New York State, you can do this quite easily, special VFR. Now, if you are going to fly special VFR, you got to fly low level first on a clear sunny day so that you can take note of all the high terrain and towers that are poking up that can kill you. And that's not going with your LO chart. You're going to use your VNC and your VTAs to make sure you don't go into anybody's airspace. And then you just talk to people as you need to talk. And the good thing about special VFR, you can go up, you can go down, you can go left, you can go right. You don't need permission to do nothing. You just basically do what you got to do. But you do got to practice it in good weather first. And always fly the same track line. Not your heading, the track line. Stay on that line. And then you can use the big hills and the towers as actual nav aids. That's right. It's the tower that you don't know that's there that kills you. But if you know the tower is there, you can actually fly towards it. And then if you get close to it, you can pop up in the cloud momentarily, cross it on the GPS, and then come back down, and then keep your way going all the way to destination. All right? So, now that we got that done, There's one other thing you got to watch if you are going to be aircraft B flying in open air. You need to check the weather all the way through and make sure the layers are all good. And make sure you give yourself a couple thousand feet. If it gets too squeezy in there, you're going to have this. And I'm going to put this up on the screen for you right now. And here we go. And it's called tunneling. And now you can see where the aircraft here is in open air, but you can see there's ice all over the place. And as that aircraft is flying along, it's going to go smack dab right into the cloud of ice. And now you're going to have to turn around and come back. And if you turn around and come back, you might not find that tunnel again, and now you're picking up ice to get out of there for the next 20-30 miles, retreating back out of that area. If you do get into that situation, try to intercept your track line the same way you're going to your destination and get back on it again. Intercept your track line and then get out of it. Alright? But with proper flight planning, that should not happen. Because sometimes, guys, you're just going to say it's a scrub. You can't do it. Especially if you're flying something like a Caravan. That thing is an ice pig. Alright? Light rime, that's it. You get in it, you get out. Alright, and I think that is pretty much it. I think we covered everything here today. I just wanted to make sure I go over this with you because it's really, really tough for me to watch the accidents kind of happening the same way all the time. That's why I'm doing these videos, is to keep you safe. Alright, so take this with a grain of salt. Go back and take a look at this now, this video, and then maybe check other sources, you know, and how they would do things. But I'll tell you, you follow these methods, it'll keep you safe. And yeah, you might find yourself saying, I can't do the flight today because there's too much ice up there and I can't get over the mountains or whatever it may be. But this is something to look at so that you don't get yourself into trouble. Alright, so until next time, guys, always fly safe and take care of yourself. Alright? So long.